There are things you do every single day that feel completely harmless. Normal, even. But beneath the surface, they're quietly dismantling the person you're meant to be, piece by piece, so slowly that you don't notice until years have passed and you barely recognize yourself anymore. My name is Father Simon. For over 2 decades, I've sat across from people in their darkest moments, listening to confessions that rarely start with the big, obvious mistakes. No, they start with the small things, the daily choices that seemed insignificant. And what I've learned is this: destruction doesn't announce itself with thunder, it whispers. Today, I want to talk about 5 patterns that people repeat daily, thinking they're just getting through life, when in reality, they're building their own invisible prison. The first silent destroyer: speaking to yourself in ways you'd never speak to another human being. Listen to the voice in your head for just one day. Count how many times you call yourself stupid, worthless, a failure. How many times you say, "I always mess this up," or "I'll never be good enough." You wouldn't speak to a stranger this way, but you speak to yourself this way dozens of times a day, and you think it's just honesty. I remember a woman who came to me, exhausted in ways sleep couldn't fix. She couldn't point to a single traumatic event. It was 1,000 tiny moments. 1,000 times she told herself she wasn't enough, until that became the foundation of her entire identity. Here's what most people don't understand. Your mind doesn't know the difference between a real threat and the threats you create with your own thoughts. Every time you attack yourself internally, your body responds as if you're under actual assault. Day after day, year after year, you're living in a war zone that you yourself are creating. Think of it like this. Imagine you hired someone to follow you around all day, criticizing every move you make, predicting your failures, reminding you of every past mistake. You'd call that psychological abuse. But when you do it to yourself, you call it being realistic. Now, if what I'm sharing resonates with something inside you, support this video with a like and subscribe to the channel. There's so much more we need to talk about. Now, let's continue. The second silent destroyer: consuming content that you know degrades you, then wondering why you feel empty. I'm talking about the hours you spend scrolling through lives that aren't yours, comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. The videos that leave you feeling worse about yourself. The content that titillates but never satisfies, that promises fulfillment but delivers shame. A young man once told me he felt disconnected from everything real in his life. His relationships felt shallow. His work felt meaningless. And then, almost as an afterthought, he mentioned he spent about 4 to 5 hours every evening on his phone, watching things he couldn't even remember the next day. He didn't connect these two realities, but they were absolutely connected. Every piece of content you consume is either building you up or tearing you down. There's no neutral. Even the mindless stuff is training your brain to need constant stimulation. It's fragmenting your attention. It's filling the spaces where deeper thoughts should live with noise. Here's the metaphor. Imagine your mind is like a house, and you have complete control over who you invite inside. Now imagine you're allowing hundreds of strangers in every day, letting them rearrange your furniture, leave their trash everywhere, paint over your walls. You wouldn't do that with your physical home, but you do it with your internal home constantly. You might think this is just about entertainment choices, but actually, this is about something much deeper, something that most people never examine until it's too late. The third silent destroyer: making decisions from a place of fear and calling it wisdom. How many choices have you made in the last month because you were afraid? Afraid of rejection, so you didn't reach out. Afraid of failure, so you didn't try. Afraid of confrontation, so you stayed silent when you should have spoken. Fear is a brilliant manipulator. It disguises itself as practicality, as prudence, as common sense. It whispers that it's protecting you when really it's imprisoning you. There was a man, middle-aged, successful by most standards, who came to me drowning in regret. Not over what he'd done, but over what he hadn't done. The business he didn't start. The love he didn't pursue. The truth he didn't speak. Every single major decision of his adult life had been made from fear, though he'd convinced himself at the time it was wisdom. Think of fear-based living like signing a contract without reading it. You think you're protecting yourself, securing something safe. But what you're actually doing is agreeing to terms that will restrict you for years. By the time you realize what you've signed away, the cost of getting out feels impossibly high. The cruel irony is that the things we're most afraid of, rejection, failure, loss, are often less painful than the slow ache of a life unlived. The fourth silent destroyer, using other people's problems to avoid facing your own. This one is particularly sneaky because it looks like virtue. You're always available to help others. You're the one people call when they're in crisis. You give advice, offer support, solve problems. You're needed, and being needed feels like purpose. But here's the question. How much of that service is genuine compassion, and how much is avoidance? It's far easier to fix someone else's life than to face what's broken in your own. It's far more comfortable to focus on their pain than to sit with yours. And the beautiful thing, from the ego's perspective, is that this avoidance looks noble. I knew a woman who was everyone's counselor, everyone's rock. But her own marriage was falling apart. Her own children barely knew her. Her own heart was so buried under other people's stories that she'd forgotten what her own voice sounded like. Think of it like being a doctor who treats everyone else's wounds while ignoring the infection spreading through their own body. Eventually, you can't help anyone because you're too sick to stand. This isn't to say helping others is wrong. It's to say that using others as an escape from yourself is a form of slow spiritual death. You may have thought that the hardest part was recognizing these patterns. But that's only the beginning. The hardest part comes next. The fifth silent destroyer, knowing exactly what needs to change and doing nothing about it. This is the one that haunts people most. You know the relationship is toxic, but you stay. You know the job is draining your soul, but you don't look for alternatives. You know the habit is destroying you, but you repeat it tomorrow. Not with big lies, with small, reasonable-sounding ones. It's not the right time. I need to be more prepared. Other people have it worse. I'll start next week, next month, next year. I've sat with people who have described their problems with stunning clarity. They understand the pattern. They can trace it back to its roots. They can articulate exactly what needs to happen. And then they do nothing. And 6 months later, a year later, 5 years later, they're describing the same problems with the same clarity. But awareness without action is just sophisticated denial. It's a way of feeling like you're addressing the problem without actually having to change anything. Imagine you're in a house that's slowly filling with water. You can see it rising. Someone has opened the door. The exit is right there. But you stand frozen, explaining to yourself very rationally why now isn't the best time to leave. And while you're explaining, the water reaches your chest, your neck, your mouth. That's what knowing without doing looks like. So here we are. 5 patterns. 5 silent destroyers. And if you're honest with yourself, you're doing at least 3 of them right now, today. The question isn't whether you recognize yourself here. The question is what you're going to do about it. Because here's the truth. You are not a victim of these patterns. You are their author. Every single day, you write them into existence with your choices. And that means you also have the power to write something different. Not tomorrow. Not when circumstances are better. Now, let me give you something practical. First, pick one of these 5 patterns, the one that hit you hardest, and write it down. On paper. Make it concrete. Second, identify the lie you've been telling yourself to justify this pattern. Write that down too. Third, commit to one small, specific action that contradicts this pattern. Something doable today. If you speak to yourself with contempt, spend 5 minutes writing one kind thing about yourself. If you consume degrading content, delete one app from your phone. If you make decisions from fear, say yes to one small thing that scares you. Fourth, do this tomorrow. And the day after. Not perfectly, just consistently. Because transformation doesn't happen in the big moments. It happens in the daily repetition of small, honest choices. And fifth, tell someone. Write it in the comments if nowhere else. There's power in naming it publicly, even anonymously. You don't have to stay trapped in these patterns. But you do have to choose differently. And that choice is available to you right now. Your past doesn't have to be your future. But your present has to change for your future to look different. The 5 silent destroyers only have the power you give them. Starting today, you can begin taking that power back. One choice, one day, one small act of honesty with yourself. That's where freedom begins.